starting the next session on entrepreneurs, I will kindly request my panel, Raphael Marti and Mohammed Al-Fadan, to join me on the top table, please. The entrepreneur tag, to call it Internet Entrepreneurs, then abbreviated it to be iEntrepreneurs. For us, we believe that part of the iTECH Gulf is about the next generation of software developers, game developers, and IT engineers who will come up with the future Facebooks, the future LinkedIn, and the future Twitter in their own right. Here in the Gulf, we think we have potential gene pool of talent that can actually develop those new industries. So I would like to start this session off by inviting somebody whose own biography says that Rafi is a leading thinker and advocate of visualizing for unlocking insights into data. But what we also don't realize that Mr. Marty on my right-hand side is also a leading thinker and visualizer of actually creating internet, IT businesses, ICT businesses. So we're actually going to get him to give us his first-hand insights of how he has developed himself into his successful businesses that he has today. And hopefully we can take some lead from him. We'll be followed after that by Mohammed Al-Fadan, who is our iEntrepreneur of the Year, the first iEntrepreneur of the Year for iTECH Gulf, who'll be contextualizing that and putting that within the Gulf, a GCC, an Arab context. First, if Raphael, could you start, please? Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. I'm going to share a little bit of a perspective with you that I gained starting a couple companies now, and I hope to be a little controversial when I do that. I have a few slides prepared, and I'm going to just use those to walk through my little spiel here. So just briefly as a background, so you kind of know who I am and why you should even listen to me. I grew up in Switzerland many years ago, and got really lucky to be able to go to the Silicon Valley during the boom in 99, 2000, the internet boom. I was part of a software company out there as an intern, as a computer scientist working on Java programs, and I was able to firsthand experience what it meant to be part of the boom. I was very disappointed that I didn't have a degree yet when I did that. I was in the middle of getting my computer science master's at that point, and I was so disappointed because during the boom in 1999, there were companies that offered, as a signing bonus to start a job, they offered you a BMW Z3. I was like, why don't I have my degree yet? I could go work there. So I was very disappointed. In the end, it's probably a good thing I wasn't quite done with my studies yet because, as you all know, the economy turned down after the boom, and I'm not sure what happened to those BMWs, but they might have been taken away from those guys or whatever. After I finished my internship, I went back to Switzerland, finished my degree, and then was so in love with the area in San Francisco and the Silicon Valley that I tried to go back, and 11 years ago, I made that dream a reality, and I moved to San Francisco, where I've been ever since. I've gotten really lucky, and I was able to work at a couple startups very early on in the Silicon Valley, a company called ArcSight. There were 30 or 40 people when I started working there, and we were in a small office somewhere. I had no idea how this company is going to do. Today, if I were to start at a company with a new job, I would look at their financials, and I would look who their board is and their investors and all that kind of stuff. Back then, when I started at ArcSight, I had no idea. The only thing I went on was my gut. During my interview, which lasted 7 hours straight, I had so much fun talking to these people. I was like, I gotta go here. They know what I'm talking about. They speak the same language. And it was the right choice. I just got lucky. The company went public, got sold to HP, and ArcSight is today the security part of HP. I made a pretty bold move at some point at ArcSight right before they went public, before they went IPO. I said, I'm out. I'm going to go to Splunk. And the CEO called me in his office. He's like, Rafi, you're crazy. You want to be here when this all happens. I'm like, no, I'm kind of done. I feel like I'm in a dead end. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. So I went on to a company called Splunk, which some of you might have heard of. Back then, not a lot of people knew about the company. Another leap of faith on my side. I just felt like there's something there. I like that company. And then 2 years into that, I got out of Splunk and started my own company, a cloud-based log management service, sort of a SaaS play for log management. We got a bunch of venture funding. We did the whole Silicon Valley thing. You go out there, you get some investors to give you money in return for a lot of your company. We got some more money. We gave up even more of our company. It was an interesting ride for a couple of years that I ran the company. We learned a lot. I left that 2.5 years ago and started another company called Pixel Cloud that I'm working on right now. So that's a little bit of background of where I'm from and what I'm doing. So if we go to the next slide, it's too bad it's not animating. I was going to ask, who in here wants to start a company at some point? A couple of you. So don't do it. It might sound glamorous to start a company, be the CEO of a company, but I can tell you, this is a picture of Switzerland. The mountains are steep that you have to climb. There's no train going up there, unlike on this picture. You have to take every step yourself, and it's hard. There's a lot of challenges that you're facing when you start a company. I have people, especially in San Francisco, it is crazy. Everybody starts their own companies. And I have people that are like, I want to start a company at some point. And I ask them, what are you going to do? They're like, I don't know, I just want to start a company. And I'm like, don't do it. You have to have an idea. You have to have a passion for something that you want to start. There's no job title that's an entrepreneur. I maybe know a handful of people that are true entrepreneurs that just can go out, they start all kinds of businesses, and that's what they do. But in general, these people, they're unicorns, right? They're just not, they're not like me or like a lot of other people out there. You have to be made of that special sauce to be an entrepreneur. But if you have something that you're really passionate about, you find something you're like, you know what, I'm willing to go through whatever it takes. This is what I want to do. I want to wake up every morning and think about this problem. Then I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. So actually, let's do that. So the first thing you need to be able to really understand is you need to have a very deep understanding of a problem that you're solving. So whatever company, whatever product you want to build, whatever thing you want to make, have a deep understanding of that problem. Really understand why there is a need for a solution in there. And how does that solution look? What exactly is it that you want to build or want to give people that actually solves that problem that they have? And then ask yourself, can you build that solution? Because it might be way too complicated. Be honest with yourself. Can you do that? Can you bring the right people into a room that can help you building it? And can you build it in some kind of a reasonable time and at reasonable cost? The picture you're seeing here is a picture of the Bay Bridge that connects San Francisco with the East Bay, with Oakland. This is during the construction a couple of years ago. They realized that the old bridge that you see on the right there was actually not earthquake-proof enough. So they started building a new bridge right next to it that is a little more earthquake-proof. The problem there was that, well, they knew they could build this thing. I mean, they have enough money to do that or throw at the problem, but it was way over budget and way over time. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to be able to, like, if you do that, you're out of money, you can't live. You need to put food on your table. So the next thing you need to look at, what is the market for your solution? It's okay if you can build something, but if no one wants to buy it, if there's no market for this, if no one wants to pay money for it, you can't make money yourself, and again, you're at a loss. How well do you know that market? If you're trying to build some kind of an IT gadget, some service in the cloud that people should use to do Twitter or to automate their tweets or something like that, how well do you know that market of the people that might buy this? Who is buying this? What's the persona? Is it a marketing person? Is it a director of marketing? What kind of budget do they have? How do they make purchases? Can they just spend money any time of the year, or is there a special time in the year that they buy things? All those things are, you have to understand that because otherwise you can't sell to these people. And then also understand how long your sales cycle is. I'm in a business where I'm selling to Fortune 500 companies. My sales cycles from initial contact with a customer to actually closing business is something between 6 and 18 months. That is crazy. Think about it. I build a product, I go and start talking to a customer today. A year and a half later, I might actually sell that thing. I need to have leeway to actually do that, right? I need to have the money in the bank to support that. So those are a couple things to think about in the market. Then think about what your business model is. What's the pricing? How do you charge for this thing? Is it per tweet that they're sending? Is it per core that they need in a server? Is it by data volume? Is it by the number of users using the system? And think about how that in the end, from a financial perspective, how does that get you to profitability? So if I build a product and I charge by user, right? How many users are using my system? And I'm selling that into an organization, and in the organization, there's only one person that does that. Well, I might make that really expensive, right? But if there are potentially 100 users in the corporation, I can make it cheaper. So keep those things in mind. Figure out in your financial model, it doesn't have to be super complicated and you have to have an MBA to build one of those things, but figure out when do you hire who in your company. Initially, often what we do with IT companies, you have developers. At some point, you need a salesperson. At some point, you need a product manager. You need documentation people. You need quality assurance. And then you need marketing people. So when do you hire these people? Put that into your financial plan. And then it's something that might be slightly culturally different, but in San Francisco, I haven't seen a single company that wrote a business plan. Business plans are usually like those 30-page documents that go into all of the details of your company. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to understand all those things. Think about all these areas. Think about the marketing, the product management, your roadmap, the market itself, the pricing, the financial model. You have to go through all those things, but save the time of writing that all down in a very nice document and rather understand what you're talking about. The book you see on the top right, the Business Model Generator or Generation, is a fantastic book that I can recommend for anyone who is trying to build a business model. It's something called the Business Canvas that they advocated. It helps you kind of think through all these problems that you need to think through. Who are your suppliers? How do you sell to different people? So that's something to look at if you're trying to write or come up with a business plan and think about all these things. Now, a very quick example of sort of that financial model. And this is something that at the company Loggly that I was running for a while, we went through. So the scenario is I have this cloud SaaS business, right? People can go online, they can fill in their information, give me your credit card, and I charge them $250 a month on average. Now, I have staff, I have people that I have employees, right? I pay them about $10,000 a month on average, right? That's just a number sort of to throw in there. That doesn't mean that necessarily they get $10,000 as a salary. Maybe it's, I pay them $7,000, I have $3,000 overhead because we have an office, I have equipment I have to buy for them and insurance and all those kinds of things. 10,000 is a good number to use in these models. So I have 10 people, say, right? I have some developers, I might have a marketing person. Now, my profit margin is 50%, say, right? 50% I need to actually run my infrastructure per user. So in the end, I need 800 customers if you do the math. I hope the math is right. 800 customers. Now think about that. That's interesting. That's a pretty big number. Now think what that means. Well, it probably means you need some more staff, more employees on your side to actually deal with support. Because these guys are going to call in and say, hey, this is not working, or how do I do this? Or I would like to do that, and could we do this as well? You need people that help answer these questions, otherwise you lose your customers. So you get sort of in this vicious circle where you have to hire more people to support these guys. Well, that means I need to have more customers to actually pay for the employees that I have. So it's this constant cycle that you need to think about when you come up with your business model. And that's just a very, very simple example here. All right. Next topic, funding. There's multiple ways to get a company off the ground. You can self-fund. If you have a way to put money into your company, if you do, maybe you do some consulting on the side, be careful with the consulting thing. That's going to distract you from actually building your business. So how do you divvy that up? You don't want to spend all day doing some consulting and then at night you do your other job of building a product. That usually doesn't work that well. Do you want to take friend and family money? Be careful with that. Taking money from your friends and then your company going down south, you might not have friends anymore afterwards. So be careful with that. But it might be a great way to get a little bit of money into your company. And then you can get outside investors. And that's a very, very interesting topic as well. I'm saying here getting $500,000 is easy. And it kind of is, especially in San Francisco. It's not that hard to raise $500,000 on a somewhat decent idea. There's a website called AngelList. If you go to angel.co, that's basically a way for companies to put themselves out there and then attract angel investors to give you some money. It's a fantastic way to raise angel money. Now, having said that, I'm going to discourage you to do that, because what are you going to do with that money? You raise $500,000, okay, what now? Well, you might be able to run, I don't know, you have 3 people, you might be able to go for a year and a half, right? You can pay yourself a salary, you build a product, great. What now? You have a product, maybe you sell it a little bit, but you can probably not sell it so that you actually make enough money to pay all your salaries. You have to make $30,000 a month to cover your 3 people's salary. That's already quite a lot of product you have to sell, depending on who you're selling to. Well, what that means is you raise the next round of money, right? First, you get $500,000, and then you raise the next one, because now you have the product, you actually want to sell it, but you need money to actually get those customers. And then think about the sales cycle again, right? I said 18 months for me. Well, how do you support yourself during those 18 months? So you raise another round of money, and this time we're talking about real money. You probably want to raise $5 million to actually really boot up your company. You need suddenly sales and marketing and all these other things. Well, can you raise that money? And I'll get into that in a second. I have seen a bunch of business models where the founders are way too optimistic on getting to profitability, right? When you actually break even, you get enough customers to pay you money that you can pay everybody. Be careful. Use a factor of 2 or 4 in those calculations. You're always going to be too optimistic because you believe in your stuff, and you should. But those predictions are always going to be way too optimistic. By the way, the sign on top there, Sand Hill Road, that probably doesn't mean much to you guys. Sand Hill Road is probably one of the richest streets in the world, which is in the Silicon Valley in Menlo Park. It's just about probably 30 minutes from San Francisco. All the big venture capitalists, Kleiner Perkins, Greylock, Sequoia, Benchmark, all these big venture capitalists that invest in all the businesses out there, they have an office on Sand Hill Road. You drive down that road, it's one of the richest streets or most money available. And the funny thing is, halfway on the road, there's no more cell phone reception. They can't afford putting another tower in there that actually would serve all the cell phone signal. It's kind of funny. Now, we're talking about institutional investment, right? You want to get that $5 million for your company because you have this great idea and everything. 1% of all companies out there are sort of eligible for venture capital. That's every 100 person. So it's not even one person in here that's starting a company. If you try to get institutional investment, if you show up at the doorsteps of any of the venture capitalists, you need to be able to make somewhat of a story that you have $1 billion business, that there's an opportunity for you to sell enough product or build something that enough people want, that's $1 billion market. That's incredibly hard. When we did the pitch for Loggly, we went around, and I remember we were sitting in the offices of Andreessen Horowitz, one of the hottest investors out there. We gave our pitch. In the end, they looked at us. They're like, "Where's the $1 billion market?" I look at my co-founder. I'm like, "Huh?" I'm like, We don't want to build a billion-dollar business. There's enough money here. We're going to make this a big business, but there's no billion-dollar market. They're like, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in. Goodbye. They're not interested. For them, it's not worth to invest in smaller companies. So think about this long and hard. Now, if you think you have that, there are 3 things you also need beyond that big market that they're actually going to invest in you. You have to have a team that can deliver. You need to have customers or traction, at least being able to show that you can really sell this stuff. Ideally, you already have customers, and you can show that you can repeat that sale. And you need product. Keep that in mind. So raising money is not that simple. Now, anyone recognize what this is, this picture? Oracle, I guess, if you can sort of read the label there in the second tower. One of the largest companies in the Silicon Valley. If you drive up on the 101, which is one of the main freeways in the Silicon Valley, you will see these towers on the right-hand side, just about 20 minutes outside of San Francisco. Now, the Silicon Valley is very, very special when it comes to startups. In San Francisco, there's a humongous boom right now. Literally every second person you talk to, they're starting a company. It's ridiculous. A lot of them haven't thought about all of this, by the way, so don't be discouraged. Now, why is the Silicon Valley different? I had all these bullets on this slide initially, and then I Googled around a little bit, and I found this quote from Paul Graham. He said, basically, what it comes down to, why is the Silicon Valley different? It's because there are rich people and there are nerds, geeks, developers, hackers. Now, how does that explain the Silicon Valley? Well, you need crazy people that are really passionate about an idea of building something and just go and do it. That's that passion I mentioned at the beginning. That's the nerds. But then at some point, you need the rich people that actually fund this kind of stuff. And people, ideally, that actually understand something about entrepreneurism and people that understand what it means to have a startup. A lot of the people in the Silicon Valley, they grew up, they were entrepreneurs themselves, and they made money by building companies, and they understand what it takes. It's not an easy ride to get to something profitable. And they can help along the way of figuring out what are some of the roadblocks you're going to run into. There have been numerous places where people have tried to build another Silicon Valley. Like if you look at Sofia and Tripolis in France, in southern France by Nice, they put a whole bunch of big companies together like Cisco and Symantec and HP and whatnot and built this. They tried to build another Silicon Valley. Guess what? Those big companies are not nerds. You can bring them there and try to generate innovation, but it's not the same as the Silicon Valley, where every second person has this next big idea. Oh my God, I'm going to build this other da-dee-da-dee-da-dee that's becoming the next WhatsApp or whatever it is, right? So that's kind of the ingredient you need. There's also a whole big supporting ecosystem around San Francisco. There, I go to a party somewhere and you run into people that have started 5 companies and this next VC and this and that. It's just, it all is there. There are lawyers right there that understand the startup business. There are supporting functions and so on. So it's a special environment, and it's definitely a fun place to start a company. Now, to kind of sum up, there's a couple of very miscellaneous things that when I was thinking about what it really takes to start a company, the first thing I want to say is relationships. And then the second thing is relationships. Network, meet people, build relationships for whatever it is. And foster those relationships, make friends. I can't tell you how many times I was glad that I knew someone here or there that could help me. I needed advice on incorporating my company. I needed advice on how do you do all the benefits for your employees, or how do I have to register for this, or at what stage of my company do I need to do that? By thinking about who do I know, who in my network could help me, I was able to say, oh, that's right, this other person has done this, or I know someone that is an accountant, or whatever it is. These relationships come in so super handy. Think about PR, being invited to a conference somewhere where you can present. That's amazing PR. Well, if I didn't make a connection with someone, I would probably not stand here today. So relationships is incredibly important. If you're trying to get venture capital money, don't call them or send them an email out of the blue. They're not going to respond. Forget it. It will end up in the wastebasket somewhere. Get a warm intro from someone. Try to figure out who you know that knows the VC. Ask them for an introduction. But also make sure that this is a credible source. Go to someone that has a good reputation with the VC, not someone that lost their money or something like that, right? I mentioned building the pitch deck instead of a business plan. So build your very 10-slide pitch deck. There's a ton of information on the internet on how to build a pitch deck. Look at that. Take that as input. When you're starting with a company, the team is incredibly important. It's like, this is the thing. You're going to get into a marriage. You're going to be with some people day in, day out. So make sure that you understand who's in control. When I started Loggly, we had a 50-50 partnership. My partner, Cord, and I, we owned the same amount of the company. We had the same say. Not always that good. If at any point in time we knew that one of us was the final decision maker because we owned more of the company or we had more say for whatever reason, that would have helped. Because then the other person's like, all right, it's your call. And you can do that also by having very clear roles and responsibility, right? So that you say, look, you're the CTO, you run product, that's it. You're making the final call on those things. I'm the CEO, I own the rest of the business. Sometimes I might have to overwrite you on a technical decision, but that's because I have very good business reasons to do so. But in the end, my CTO, he makes a decision on technology. I'm not making those decisions. I might have an argument with him about stuff, and I might be devil's advocate, but he is responsible for it. He has to stand up in the end if it doesn't work. Get ready for the long haul. You hear all these stories, people raising money, people trying to sell things. I can't tell you how many times I show up at a customer or at a VC, and they're like, sorry, we're not interested, you're not doing this or not doing that. It might be a misunderstanding that they don't understand what you're doing. It might be whatever. Keep going. Go to the next VC. There are enough of them out there. If you just have a good technology, that doesn't mean you're going to have a good company. There's so many companies in San Francisco that have amazing technology, super smart guys. But just because they have a cool product doesn't mean they're going to actually make money. Coming back to that business model thing. And then the last thing I want to say is pay it forward. I can't tell you how many different companies I've just sat down with and talked through things. It's not necessarily that I always have the answer, or I have an opinion oftentimes, but just talking through some things, people get a benefit from that. I have connected hundreds of people with each other for whatever reasons, right? It's like someone needs a finance person. Well, help them out. If you know someone, connect them. It's helping both of them. I can guarantee you the time you invest in doing these kinds of things, of helping people out, that might be very small things. You will get the payback at some point. I can guarantee you that. And with that, I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. And don't worry, it's before lunch, so I'm sure everybody is hungry, and me too, so I will not take long from your time. I'm sure Ahmed is worried about that as well. This is a very interesting topic, basically, and it's very close to my heart. I was very happy that iTECH and the organizers gave me this great opportunity, basically, that to talk a little bit about what I really loved. And in fact, I worked through this for a good while, and like my colleague mentioned his experience about the way it is in the other part of the world. I will tell you a little bit about how it is in this part of the world. It's a little bit different. That's what turned most of my hair gray. And to find out a solution, I started losing the rest of the hair, you know. But that's not bad news. That's good news. I liked when the young lady there raised her hand that she wanted to start something by her own. And like you, I encourage them to do that. And I'm sure back in your mind you disagree with what my colleague was talking about in fundraising. I'm sure you have in mind that, okay, what fundraising you are talking about? I'll talk to my dad and he will give me the money, right? Or I'll talk to my mom, she will give me some money, and my uncle will give me the rest of the money. So what's your problem? You know, this is the way it works. The culture is a bit different here. You talk about Silicon Valley, you talk about Sequoia Capital. You know, Sequoia Capital, for those who don't know about Sequoia Capital is the capital in Silicon Valley, which I wish the youngsters at least have the chance to meet with them one day. Sequoia Capital is the capital and the money behind most of the companies in the world today, including Google, Cisco, and you name it, from these big companies. I mentioned the name Sequoia Capital to one of the bankers in the region here, just to give you a feeling about the culture. And I told them a little bit about who Sequoia Capital were. Guess what? Next day they sent an email. I liked it when you said, don't ever send an email to a venture capital. Next day they sent an email to Sequoia Capital asking for funding. You know, Sequoia Capital, you pack your things and you go, and you sleep at their door, you know, until they open the door and you present your story, your problem to them, or your project to them. You don't send them an email. But the difference in the culture is different. Number one, they stolen the idea that I brought to the bankers in this part of the world, and they went behind me trying to speak to Sequoia Capital. That's something which I will address here. And number two is the way and the approach. And companies in Silicon Valley, you are talking about companies who will be serving the world, you know, talking about companies like Facebook or Google or this. Their audience is the globe, everybody around the world. But if you talk about somebody in Bahrain or in the Gulf or in the Middle East, whom are you going to serve? Who are your audience? Why Sequoia Capital will even look at your story? So maybe talking to your dad or mom to have the funding is maybe a better story. But is it true that you have to be very careful when you talk about whom to get the money from? I learned something yesterday from Mr. Anwar Abdurrahman, that when he said the statement, which I really loved, that I like talking to you and looking at you instead of reading on the document or reading on the screen. So I have put a little of information on the screens just to remind me, but you can read it, of course. The question is there real entrepreneurs in the Arab world, you know? I think we need at some stage to be blunt, and we need to be very open, and we need to be very honest. You know, I'm glad today I'm not talking about technology, I'm not talking about what the rest of the presentations were talking about. We talk about where we are, what we want to do, and how we want to do it. I finish a school, I finish good university, I apply for a job, I get a job. And getting a job maybe in this part of the world is sometimes it's not difficult, because maybe it's easier to talk to my dad or my mom or my brother or my sister or my uncle or my friend, and they will find me somewhere to work. And I get good pay, I live happily, very nicely. Why the headache? You know, why to go through the hassle of being an entrepreneur, or come up with an idea, come up with a project, and worry about all these things, about product, solution, pain, funding, and all that? Why is all this hassle? Maybe just finding a job and enjoying life is much easier, especially for the young people. They are coming from school or university, and they go to the real world in life. It's not easy. Me personally, I enjoy doing this, but I learned, and I had to go through a lot of learning exercises. I'll just give you one story about the funding in this part of the world. You know, I know in the 80s, it sounds too long ago. Maybe some of you were not born at that time. But in the 80s, a true entrepreneur, you know, who came with a great idea, not necessarily about technology. This was a banker with great experience, and he had the great idea to create an investment bank in Bahrain to serve the world, you know, to create an international investment bank. And he went to an investor from here, and that investor turned him down. Why? Because he didn't even listen to the idea, by the way, and he didn't give him the chance to explain his thoughts. The reason why, because he didn't know him. The same entrepreneur went back, and he was smart. He went and spoke to somebody that he knew, and that person knew the investor. In fact, he was his cousin. And he went back with that gentleman to the same potential investor that turned him down about the same idea, about the same project, and guess what? He got all the funding he needed, and today, this bank we are talking about takes a headquarters from Bahrain, and it's one of the very big and major international banks in the world. So the way things happen in this part of the world, you know, this person was smart, because maybe if he went to Silicon Valley or anybody from Europe or US, this will never happen. But in this part of the world, this is, you know, I tell you some good stories and some bad stories. This is the good story, that sometimes it's easy to do things here, easier than the rest of the world. But in some other stories, you cannot do it. Now, talking about the culture here, you know, the culture today, if you go to your family after studying and talking about all the money spent in your good education, good universities and all this, and talking to them about starting something new, you know, whom to talk to today? Where, in our culture, where will you go and talk? Now, my colleague said that they go to Silicon Valley, and they have this Sandhill road where you have all the money is on that road, and you go knock doors and present to them your ideas. Now in here, where can you go? Maybe you go to your friends, you talk to them about your idea. I'm sure some of them will laugh at your idea and your thoughts. It depends how much you believe in yourself and how much self-esteem you have that you will go ahead and do it. But you will have a lot of challenges. So other than this, you will go to rich families. Okay, rich families in the Gulf, they are well known. Everybody knows them. They know that they have tons of money. But will they invest a little money? You know, even these people having tons of money in the Gulf here, and they have cash money. You know, we talk about the difference in rich in this part of the world. You talk about rich people with cash money, hard cash. In the West, you talk about somebody worth 10 billion. You look at him, that's calculating his shares, the value of the shares, the value of the assets, and this. It's different. So when you talk about 10 billion there, it's different than 10 billion here. There's a big difference. So you talk to these guys about 50,000, not a billion, not a million, not $500,000 that my colleague mentioned is very easy to get in Silicon Valley, and I will tell you why it's very easy to get and how it's very easy to get in Silicon Valley. And here you talk to them about 50,000 dinar or dollars or euros, you will never get it. Why? Because the money is very little for these guys, number one. Number two, what's the return on the investment? You talk about solution, product, and all this. What is it in here? Here, the culture is completely different. What I'm trying to get at, we'll talk about it in a short while. The culture here is not the same. I tell you, we have some entities where we have some funds helping the ideas and the projects. You go to them, they give you some money to start with. the good thing that you will get the money, but the bad thing that the money will be spent before you even start. How it will be spent, because what's required is nothing mentioned from what my colleague said, is here they need visibility study, number one, and visibility study will be done by one of the big fours, which they will take maybe half of the money that you are already getting or you already have in your pocket. And then you need to do some marketing and I don't know what, and that will take the rest of the money. So they make sure that you are clean before you start. Now, having somebody to do the visibility study and all that for your idea, which you have in mind, my great belief that nobody on earth will be able to express himself or herself but you. And unless you believe in your idea and you really want to go for it, you should just drop it. I think this is, if one thing I learned in life is, if you don't believe in it, nobody else will. Today I dress differently. If people who saw me yesterday, I was dressed differently yesterday. And that's why, one of the reasons is the presentation. And I'll tell you why. I heard a lot of comments since this morning because of the way I dressed. And I like the comments, in fact. Now, one of the comments said that you are very casual today. Okay, I am very casual. Some of the people said, oh, you are not dressed up today. That's very polite comment. But I tell you what's the very open comment I heard during my career. One day I was dressed like this. By the way, people in Silicon Valley, I guess they dress like this, isn't it? So this is the difference in the culture, In the culture, one of my friends and one of my good colleagues in Silicon Valley, he came to me one day dressed like this here in Bahrain, and he said to me, is it okay if we go and meet with investors in here? I said to him, well, in Silicon Valley it's okay, but in here they will think you are the office boy. And the reason I told him that specifically because one day I was visiting one of the organizations in here in this part of the world, and I was dressed up like this. I went to the reception looked at me. She was a nice lady, young. She was very polite. So she looked at me. I didn't want to meet anybody, by the way. I wanted to collect a piece of paper. That was it. But that piece of paper was so important, so I went myself to collect it. So she said, you can wait. I waited in the reception for 40 minutes, exactly 40 minutes. I was counting. And nobody even looked at me. Nobody offered me tea, coffee, or even water, But I was okay. And while I was waiting, after 40 minutes, the big boss came down, and he was walking in the reception. And while he was walking, most of his executives and the management team were walking behind him. And he stopped by and greeted me. Now, the minute he greeted me, things had changed. Everybody was welcoming me. Everybody was offering me tea, coffee, and all this. I said, no, I don't want anything. I just want to collect the piece of paper. They insisted that I go and sit in the office and drink tea, and they bring the piece of paper for me in that office. It's all because of the way I dressed, And this is very important, You laugh at it, but this is very important in our culture, unfortunately. The same person who offered me the tea and coffee and said to me something which I will always remember. She said to me that they let you wait in the reception because they thought you were the office boy. That's why when I said to you, people think I'm the office boy. It is the culture, and that's the way it is. Now you go to an investor here and ask for $500,000 dressed like this. They will not even let you in from the outside door, These are things which you need to cater, You need to address. You need to think about. You need to be aware about. Another thing, my colleague mentioned that getting $500,000 in Silicon Valley is easy. Yes, it is very easy. You can get even more than that, very easy in Silicon Valley, because people in Silicon Valley, they are into this game. Today, they are like gambling. You come up with an idea. I came across companies in Silicon Valley, and they were getting, one of my friends basically got $2 million just like this, without having any documentations, without having any papers, no visibility study, nothing like that, because his idea was a bright idea. And he told me that I need to collect more, so probably I will come down to the Middle East and you help me with that. I said to him, do you have any documents? He said, no. I said to him, how did you get the 2 million? He said, well, I talked about my idea and people got me the 2 million. This, I guarantee you, will never happen in this part of the world. Now, talking about all this from experience, from knowledge, comparing, how to offer something different for the new generations, for the future. Now, talking about the past, laughing at the past, the way it is, okay, it's the culture. We cannot change the culture. But there are things that we need to address in order to be able to do what the great people are doing in the rest of the world, the people are doing in the Silicon Valley. Now, I don't know if it's bad news or good news, that there is no single venture capital in the whole Arab world. There is no such thing as venture capitalist. You know, I collected a few years ago. I managed to collect $14 million. That was enough to create a company, and that company, in my mind, was to be the venture capital. But guess what? There is no legislation for venture capitals, so we couldn't get the license. We had the money, we had everything, but we couldn't get the license for that because there is no such thing. So without having such thing, you know, how will you talk about entrepreneurs? How you will talk about startups? The startups, where do they go today? How they will get money? Okay, so you go back to your friends, your family, and your contacts. In my view, the way forward is we need to incentivize people like Sequoia Capital and these giants basically to come here in this part of the world. Now, yesterday it was mentioned in the speeches and in the discussions that we need to have Bahrain as the hub for technology. It should be like Davos for technology and ICT, which is a great statement. And this is what we need to do to be able to be where we want. We need to create, competitions for the entrepreneurs. We need to look for, the legislations, as I mentioned. How to promote the SMBs. Now, SMBs everywhere in the world, including this part of the world, is the future. Now, once you have SMBs and you have these startups, successful startups, you will have companies starting, more companies starting, you will create jobs, you will have new environments for the youngsters. I think most of the youngsters, if they go and work for this old schools of businesses, okay, the businesses are well established, they are rich, they are successful, but companies who've been there for long time, they are, I call them old school. You will not be able to enjoy working for these old schools. I tell you very openly and very honestly, because what you have learned, your ambitions, your skills, your motives will not fit in this old school, old culture type of businesses. And things are changing. Opportunities are coming up every day. So there are a lot of opportunities for new companies and new startups, but we need to create the environment. We need to create the culture before worrying about even what will be the solution, what will be the idea. And to be a true entrepreneur, you have to come up with something new, not just copy whatever else is doing. Another thing, as I mentioned at the beginning, is when I said I can steal the idea or copy the idea, this is one of the things that's required when we talk about creating the environment. Now, do we have intellectual properties law? Do we have the IP law? If I steal somebody's idea today, will he protected or she be protected? Or you come to me, present your idea, and I can steal it very happily and very easily and go ahead and do it. This is something very crucial if we are to create the environment for this. I think I covered most of topics on this slide. Government, I didn't touch base on the government. Government plays a big role in everything, especially in this part of the world. And we need more support, more, of course, encouragement for the youngsters, as well as the legislation must be controlled and governed by the government. Now, we have a number of funds in all over the region, which can be utilized in a better way, I guess. This is all what I had to say. If there's any questions, of course, you can ask me now or later. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. That was a very, very provocative discussion ready for us to actually delve into. Just to pick up on a few points while you just get your thoughts together for questions. Raphael, you mentioned something very important, which I'm sure someone will pick up about. Essentially about entrepreneurship is inside you for your own business model. There's a difference between packaging it for banks and packaging for investors, but there's actually whether you yourself in your own mindset understand where you're going with your products. I think that's very, very crucial. But most importantly, because we're here in Bahrain today, I think, Mohammed, you've raised some very provocative questions about the Arab cultural context, and I think that's something that when in Europe, where I hail from London, and America, we keep on using as a panacea for Arab growth, saying we should develop SMEs. I was speaking to my colleague who was on a Saudi business committee the other day, and she said, you'd be surprised that we're rehashing the same old things that you did 10 years ago, 5 years ago. They wanted to look at SME development in Saudi Arabia. But we keep on forgetting the cultural context, and I think, Mohammed, you're going to get drawn in a lot of those questions about the differences within that, which you quite nicely side-footed, about the fact that the money we raise from the family, the different intellectual property protection even. How is intellectual property here to be protected? It's having a wonderful new idea, but how do you protect that? I think, whereas in Silicon Valley, there are sort of mechanisms there in place to some extent, where you've got enough lawyers to defend it, to actually look at how we can actually protect intellectual property and whether those solutions are here available in the Middle East. The access to customers, the way you were saying, Raphael, that you would approach them in the States, whereas here, Mohammed quite rightly said, there's a lot of local WASTA networks, contacts that actually has very little to do with what the product that you have to offer. And also, let's put it very bluntly, the difference in the cultural context, the role for men within an SME development and the issues expected of women within SME development. Those are very provocative issues, I think, which we would like to now explore with some questions. Is anybody here that's got any questions? At the back, there's a hand there. Is that you, Ahmed? It is Ahmed, yes, go on. Please, we'd like to keep this session going as much as possible because I think, to be honest, it's very crucial because it underpins a lot of the media attention that's coming in, the international governmental attention that's coming in. So it's very important we actually try and push out as much questions while we have such a wonderful panel here that can actually answer both from an international Western concept and from here is very much firmly in the Middle East. Yes, sir, over to you.
Yeah, I think Ahmed gave me the privilege to start my question here. Actually, it's not a question, but more of, let's say, mentioning the technological fact here in Bahrain when it comes to the, let's say, how, let's say, eligible our youth to start an entrepreneurship when it comes to technology. We have two major factors here. For example, here in Bahrain, we have the matter of the matter of education and the matter of starting up when it comes, for example, to gather capital to start at least something small in which that, let's say, the youth can come up with looking for venture capitalists, either, let's say, in Silicon Valley or somewhere else. The first thing is about education. Personally, I am a member of the External Advisory Board of Ahli University's College of IT and Engineering. We have seen not only in the private universities, but also the public universities, not only in Bahrain, but also in a big part of the Gulf as well, is that the education of technology is mostly theoretical. I mean, the things that they are learning, even the books, the people that are being taught by are people of the old school here, in which that they concentrate about the theories of making networks, about, let's say, programming, and they don't even mention developing, they all mention programming as if it was a low-end programming there for machine programming. So I think this needs like a very, very urgent need for, let's say, renovation to take the IT education at this part of the world from the 20th century to the 21st century. That's on one hand. On the other hand, I think it's gonna be a marvelous idea if, let's say, some people would think of having some sort of a technological co-working place, a place where all the youth would just gather. They would sit there. It's like a coffee shop, but more of a place where he can put his equipment, his laptop, his computers, maybe his electronic devices. They all gather in one place. It doesn't really have to be college, or it has to be, in a shopping mall or in a coffee shop or something like that. But you know that all the people over there are interested in technology. It's either those who provide or have those innovative ideas, that entrepreneurship, or those who are looking to be partners with people who have these ideas to come up with a company, like starting from the very low, from the very bottom, that student with an idea, ending up with someone like you, sir, who has connections with people abroad, maybe in the Silicon Valley. Maybe you see that this student deserves to have his idea developed. Maybe he'll be having some sort of a working demonstration of his, let's say, project, which can be escalated all the way to Silicon Valley, hopefully. So these are the 2 points that I wanted to talk about mostly.
Thank you very much. What I would suggest is, Ahmed, if you could make your points at the back, and then we'll open up a wider discussion. We'll take them together.
You need a market before you start your company, and that's how you go to investors. All right. My confusion is, I agree with you completely, but I've seen so many companies going with no market, hoping to do something, and then they get funded, and somewhere down the line, they get sold to Facebook. What do you think?
Okay, can we just, before we take that, because I think it was something that you actually mentioned about in the cultural context. I don't think that would ever happen here in Bahrain, let alone the GCC. Mohammed, do you want to make a comment before we pass it to Raphael? Was going to be, even on what the gentleman earlier on said.
Yes, I think this is very, this topic is very close to my heart. And what you say, I feel what you say, and I felt what you said before you said it many years, in fact. If you read, there was an interview with me in March 2012, which was published in the local newspapers, I think mid-March 2012. I addressed all what you said, basically by talking about a new project which we are working on. I have been personally working on for the last 6-7 years now, if not more, which is basically creating a Silicon Valley in Bahrain to serve the Middle East and North Africa. Now, seeing all the youngsters, seeing all the bright people, seeing all the educated people we come across, and I learn from you guys, by the way. It's not, the way education evolved, the way life evolved. Yesterday, if some of you were attending, I brought an example that when my kid called me one day from home and said that internet was not working at home, for him that was the end of life, But for me it was okay. I said to him, wait until I come home. I was busy at work. He said, no, I need the internet now. Probably he was playing a game with his friends online, But for him, that's the end of life. I said to him, well, son, you have to wait because I started my career with IBM, that giant, you know. IBM in my days was a dinosaur. And when it fell, there was an article on Time magazine, I remember, The Fall of the Dinosaurs, which I really loved reading about. I said to him, I worked for this dinosaur, IBM, in the old days. There was no internet, not in IBM, there was no internet in the world, you know. He said to me, how did you live those days? That was his comments. So I learned from you. I enjoy talking to young people every day. And that's why I came up basically with the idea of, I call it the ICT hub, which is basically a city, near shore city, based in Bahrain, attracting the venture capitals from the West. And that's one of the areas which I mentioned in the presentation, which is very crucial to address one of the points you mentioned. And I'm glad that you mentioned it because it shows the need. You know, when my colleague was talking about for any product, you need to have the market, you have to have the needs. And you need to make sure that your product is addressing these needs and addressing the market. This is confirming the idea, basically, that we need a near shore, basically, today, a Silicon Valley, where it will host satellite offices for the people, the big people, that hopefully one day we have one of them coming up from this part of the world, taking base in this city to serve their clients in the region. The venture capitalists will help these startups and new people, young people like yourself, to come up with the new projects and new companies. Working in that environment itself, other than the great education you are having today, will help you a great deal, you know. Being next to these people, being next to this great companies, you see the success and the ideas behind this. This is inspiring for you, for everybody, for all the new generations that they are coming. And that eventually will help having new companies coming up from this part of the world, which my dream should, I see it before I die one day.
Raphael, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so, I mean, I keep hearing that sort of the Silicon Valley as the land of honey and milk, right? It's not. I don't think everybody should aspire to, like, at some point come to the Silicon Valley. I don't think it matters. I think what you have here is a market that has money. The Gulf region has a lot of money. That's why I'm sitting here, to be honest, right? I want to do business here. There's money here. So where there is money, there's an opportunity. And being able to cater to that market, that money that's here, well, you find problems that you can solve here. You don't need to come to the Silicon Valley and take a detour to get money and then do that here. Find the problems here that you can cater to. That's one point I had. The other one is there are actually venture capitalists that are trying to bridge the sort of U.S. and the Gulf region. If anyone is interested, I'm happy to talk about that. Yeah, so try to cater to this. Now, I guess the question that came up from Ahmed, who is on the phone right now, was there are these companies out there that, if you look at them, you're like, what's the market here? Those are, again, the unicorns. Those are the 1 in a million companies that get super lucky, that are at the right time at the right point and get swooped up by Facebook for $18 billion. In the last case of WhatsApp, or whatever it was for Instagram, all those kinds of things, you have to, I don't know, you have to be born on the right day and under the right moonlight, whatever. It's like, that's not happening. I would never try to build a company like that because it's better than winning the lottery. Like, you have to be luckier than that, right? So that's why I'm saying find the market first and have something that you can actually reason about and build something for. And I keep talking to my friends about these things where you have sort of the consumer businesses where you're building the next app for this or a game or whatever it is. Those things, I do not understand consumers. I don't understand the consumer business. I don't understand how to build a service that millions of users are going to use afterwards, right? I'm not the guy that's going to build your next iPhone app or the next whatever Twitter-like service. What I understand is enterprises. That's my market. I understand what the problems they have in cybersecurity. I understand how to sell to those people. That's where I'm focusing on, right? So go where you're most comfortable, or dive into an area that you're comfortable with and learn about it, and find the problem that you want to solve there, right?
But don't you think that's slightly distracting? Because we've got lots of people looking to become entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, but their role model is the Facebook, is the Twitter and the WhatsApp. And what you've now done is obviously said to them, don't go that direction. But at the same time, there's a contradiction because your venture capitalists, not necessarily bridging the gap, are looking for that billion-dollar product. So where is the actual medium line? Same even for the GCC companies. Where do you actually find that?
I mean, you can absolutely start a company and you have this next great idea for an app or whatever it is. But when you show up in front of the venture capitalist, you're going to talk to ones that understand consumer businesses, and B, you're still showing them, look, here is how I'm going to get to 10 million users. You have to have a plan, right? You have to understand how to do that. You can't just say, you know, we're going to get 100 million users in 2 years. They're going to be like, how are you going to do that? And then you have to have an answer to actually do that, right? So I think if you know how to do that, go ahead and do that. But all these companies, they had some kind of a plan. Some are getting a little more luckier than others. But again, I'd rather not be one of a million, but one of 100 to have a shot at this whole thing.
Mohammed, but you quite rightly said in the local Arab context or GCC context, it's not going to be feasible to actually present in that way. So how do you guys expect to bridge the gap? Because the families are not going to necessarily put money on an idea as such. And you need the feasibility, and let's be honest, we won't talk about the feasibility you're going to get, but how is that actually going to work back into
No, I think there is, for the young people, there's two ways. The way which is happening in practical today, if you believe that you have a great idea, my advice is once you have it ready and you move to Silicon Valley. And once you move to Silicon Valley, within a year you will have a feeling. If you are picked up by one of the big companies, you cash your money and you come back home or you stay there. It's your call. We created a company, by the way, in Spain, and we decided to move it to Silicon Valley. And after moving it to Silicon Valley, we were picked up by Symantec after 4 months. And that was a nice deal, and that was some luck in there. We have created another company now in Belgium, and it's getting ready. We are launching it softly in the Middle East, but again, we are moving it as we speak to Silicon Valley, and we expect that we'll be picked up within a year. That's the way, because that's what makes Silicon Valley Silicon Valley. Now, if we decide to come to the Middle East here, okay, do you expect in reality that one of the rich companies or big companies will come and say, Muhammad, we are interested in buying the company? I don't expect that will ever happen. But well, you know what will happen? Mm-hmm. You know, if you build a building, this is be very real, very realistic. If you have a building here, a lot of people will knock on your door saying that we are interested in buying the building. Why? Because it's tangible. They see the building. They know it's a value. But you talk about software, technology, it's still not tangible. It's not seen as tangible yet in this part of the world.
But a company is more than just software, right? A company's customers, its revenue. So I can guarantee you, if you have a presence in the Gulf region and you're making money here with whatever product it is, there will be companies interested in buying you because they want access to the region. They want access to they want your customers, and they might want to have your product.
But then also, I'll give you an anecdotal example. A venture capital fund that I knew in the UK wanted to invest in Islamic businesses. They couldn't find anything in the UK that would get them excited because nothing was of the value, I mean, we could say the same in the States, over 100 million. So you're right, they may be successful, but they may not have the same amount of meat on the bone that
Yeah.
some of these people would like to invest.
You know, I think the real difference between, we keep calling it Silicon Valley, but between the United States market and other markets is that the US market is just huge, right? A lot of companies are there and you can sell to them. And that makes the US such an interesting place to have a business because it's one country you have to cater to. As I said, I grew up in Switzerland, right? If I start a company in Switzerland, well, it's a very small market. It's 6 million people living there. Sure, there's some big pharmas and some banks and so on. But if I want to grow my business, well, I'm going to go to the other German or whatever countries around it. Well, guess what? I have to incorporate the other countries. I have different laws. And then maybe I'm going to go to the Great Britain, right? But suddenly it's a different language and all those things. So there's all these hurdles. Very similar down here, right? Different countries, different laws, and you have to expand and all these kinds of things. That's sort of, I see that as the biggest benefit of the US because it's just humongous. It's big, right?
Just back to Mohammed saying, leave Bahrain, leave the GCC, go back and set up it outside and come back.
But then again, it's like, I guess what are you trying to do, right? When I start my company, I have an aspiration to be a large organization, but in the end, if I can make a business that makes me good money and I can live on it, that's perfect. Because in the end, my primary goal is I want to get up in the morning, I want to be excited about what I do. It doesn't matter where or what that is, and obviously I want to make some money, let's be honest here. But in the end, if I can build that here, then if I like it here, why not doing it here, right? So it doesn't have to be that everybody needs to build a billion-dollar company. I had many people, when I started talking about fundraising, they're like, Rafi, are you sure that you want venture capital? There are other ways to grow companies. You don't necessarily, not everybody is meant for that, not every company. In fact, only a very, very small percentage, right?
I just wanted to just touch on one thing which I think is very interesting. We're in the GCC in the Gulf, we've been sold this thing, and I think Mohammed alluded to it in his presentation, that entrepreneurship is about creating jobs and creating employment. But let's be very frank, for the IT entrepreneurs, you take WhatsApp, how many employees does a company like WhatsApp, which is globally worth X billions of dollars, has what, 50 employees?
Something like that, yeah.
So in reality, Mohammed, you're attracting IT companies with your idea. What do you think actually in real terms that's going to create to employment?
I think if you look at it today, okay, high-tech companies requires less and less people. But at the same time, our life and the way we are moving to, everything is depending on technology today. We spoke about cloud computing. We spoke about a number of things in the last 1 day and a half so far. All this needs people. This will never happen without people. You will need people to do everything. You will need people doing your IT more than people doing the rest of the work because everything is getting automated. Today we have created a portal, for example, which can do everything you have in a big organization. Now, deploying this portal, yes, will reduce the number of staff you are using today in the other functions, but will increase the number of staff that you are using within your IT. Now, IT in this part of the world as well is looked at as a cost. It's not looked at within the organizations as a profit center, for example. It's not looked at as the way it should be looked at. And that's why they are always pushed down. You know, when you go to these organizations trying to sell them a service, trying to sell them a solution, they have a problem with the budget. They have a problem to talk to their bosses and all this. Now, when we talk about companies that are providing these services, these companies can outsource the whole thing to these companies. These companies can end up providing their IT support, their solutions, their services, consultancy, providing professional services, educating the other staff on using the technology, updating them with technology. Technology is evolving, you know. In 6 months, if you are not updated with technology, you are out of date. It's as simple as that. So I think this will continue, and the number of jobs will required will grow. Things are evolving. You see companies, technologies are dying, and new technologies are born every day.
I mean, that's point to the gentleman over there, that it's about the education system, then it also has to change with the new requirements of this particular workforce you're going to want.
Absolutely.
Raphael, what do you say? Because Silicon Valley is this great big icon. Has it created lots of jobs, or more for the peripheral jobs?
No, it definitely created a lot of jobs. I mean,
And more billionaires spending lots of money on Ferraris.
I mean, again, the WhatsApp and whatever, those are the unicorns. They happen. That's not something that we should take as the norm. They're the other companies that they might just make a living, right? And they created a job for maybe 10 people, but take that 100 times, well, you already have 1,000 people employed. It's the small things, I think, that matter. Of course, and every now and then, out of 100, you find that one company that makes it bigger, and maybe it has 500 employees at some point, or makes it even bigger, right? Those things naturally happen out of those, if you have enough variety out there, right? And another point I wanted to make, and you kind of spurred that idea, it's if you look at 10 years, five years ago, if you started an IT company, you needed a lot of capital because you had to buy servers and equipment and da-dee-da-dee-da-dee. Today, kind of bridging the gap with other sessions here, you have the cloud. It's incredibly cheap. Well, it's cheaper, much cheaper, to start a company that way because you can rent your resources. For a few $100s a month, you can get really decent servers and you can build a cloud service. And that's a humongous opportunity where you can, instead of building that billion-dollar business right away, start smaller, start building something that people need, you get some capital, and you get the machine rolling, and so you can start expanding and bigger and bigger. And that's a fantastic model to get a company off the ground. If you look at the average amount of investment that companies need today, it's been going down and down and down. If you look at the venture capital world, they're having issues with that because back in the day, you needed $10 million to start a company. Today, you might need $500,000. And maybe you can even do it completely on your own and start with something that generates money very, very quickly. So think about that.
Okay, can I just, I want to just slightly, sorry, no, I want to just change it to completely something a bit different because I think there's lots of young people here with ideas. There's an issue about intellectual property and protecting your ideas. I mean, with lots of young people I speak to, and as a lawyer advising on businesses, everybody says, are they going to steal my idea? How do I protect it? Now, I know what Mohammed's going to give me, the Arab model, but I'll leave that for Mohammed last to sort of downsize it. But do you think that's protectable within your Silicon Valley context? Do you want to share your idea because you want to tell anybody because they might steal it?
Well, there's obviously the legal ways to protect things, right? You file patents and all those things. Patents are incredibly expensive if you go all the way through. The other thing is some people go stealth. Some companies are like, they're hiding whatever they're doing. They don't talk about it. They're building their stuff first, and then at some point they reveal what they're doing. I don't believe in that. I believe that if I really have a reason for a company to exist, I better have something that I can uniquely build and put out there that is going to be hard for other people to replicate.
Mohammed,
yeah.
within the Bahrain context, there's all this question about intellectual property protection, and especially when it comes to some software which you're involved in. How do you feel?
Bluntly or?
Yeah, bluntly, be honest. You've been very honest so far.
There is no protection. You go to present your idea today, and especially the youngsters, they come up with great ideas which we old people maybe didn't know about. And what if you present your idea and I go steal it because I have money, or I know somebody who has money and put the money and run with it? Back in 2001, when the LCD screens technology was coming up, I had a company from Malaysia, for example, asking me to set up a production facility here to cut costs on the shipping. And I came here, I presented the idea, and unfortunately, that idea was taken away and done by somebody else. But it was done not in Bahrain, this was done in Dubai, and they are in production since then. And they are producing LCD screens for all the IT companies, all the computer companies, I mean. Now, this is one area. Another area which I wanted to comment on is creating jobs and having the cloud computing and everything. Now, things are evolving and everything. Now, I remember I went to China for a meeting with one of my colleagues, and we are considered here as a small and medium business, right? And small and medium business here, you are talking about some people with 50 employees. In China, we were sitting in a meeting for small and medium businesses as well. So they started with us because we look different. So we are from the different part of the world. And they said, how many people do you have? We said, we have 50 people. And we are an IT company. The other gentleman next to me was from China. He had 1.2 million people working for him, and it was a small business, you know? So the scale is a little bit different. Maybe in here, 50 people, I see it as a lot of people. I speak to some of the old business schools. They have 1,200 employees here. I don't know what they do, honestly speaking, but they have that number of people. It's good for them. Now, based on using cloud and creating jobs and all this, let me just give you two examples, if you don't mind. We have two of the things we created. We created a recruitment portal, for example, based on artificial intelligence and based on social networks, which creates in a very intelligent way NDA for the candidate as well as for the jobs posted by the employers. Now, this portal, for example, what we are offering, part of what we are offering around the world is any people who are starting or who want to start without having any investment, any technology headache and all this, they can take that portal, for example, white label it or take it as a franchise and start working from day one without an initial cost. And they can just go speak to these employers from their friends and this, and they can have a job created from day one for them. And this can be for X number of people. The other one we have done is for travel, for example. Travel, we done exactly the same concept. We have the whole portal, which people can do the booking, and they can get the commission from the booking of the airlines, hotels, car rental, and all this from day one. And today, to have the cost of creating a travel agency, for example, you need to have the infrastructure, the system, and everything. We have already done all that. All what you need to do is just use the system. So these are two examples, for example, of the things that we have actually created. And depending on cloud computing, by the way, this is a purely cloud computing. You don't need a server, you don't need anything. You just log in, and the system is yours.
Okay, I think it's going to be lunchtime, but before lunch you've got 30 seconds to a minute, gentlemen. What is one thought you want to leave people with? I'll start with Mohammed and then with you, Rafael. You have longer time to think about it. I know you both mentioned that you obviously have a passion, and entrepreneurs have to have a passion. But we are one last 30 seconds, last bit of advice to camera, to people who are watching this later on YouTube. What would you suggest to young entrepreneurs?
Well, what I suggest, which I believe in basically, is unless, as I mentioned earlier, unless you really believe in your idea and in yourself, go for it. Otherwise, just find a job and settle in.
Thank you. Rafael?
It's a hard one. I would say surround yourself with smart people. I'll leave it at that. Just think about that.
Thank you very much. The gaming workshop is on after this. Lunch is served in the room next door. Thank you very much, and thank you to our speakers.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a question for Mr. Rafael Mardi.
Sure.
First of all, thank you for coming all the way out here from California. I appreciate all of you speaking. You mentioned that to sell a solution or a product to a client, anywhere from the first time you meet them until you close the deal, it may take 6 to 18 months. This really applies, in my opinion, all over the world when trying to sell something or trying to close a deal. But in terms of IT solutions or an IT product given to a company, selling to another company, whether it's business to a business or business to a consumer, how much after-sales service, in your experience, have you taken to ensure that your client or that business is satisfied and happy and get great feedback? I mean, you want to mitigate how much after-sales service you provide to them so that you sell them a solution or a product, you get the money, you're out, you have a good name, a good reputation. In your experience with cloud computing and analytics and services,
It's a fantastic question. So I like it because you're not done when you sell the product the first time, right? That's the first money you get. Often that's not as much as you actually have a potential to maybe grow in the company or sell more, or maybe you have a subscription deal anyways and you want to make sure they keep buying from you. The cloud is actually amazing for that because you can measure engagement, right? You can see how much people come back, you can see every login they make, they can see every action they're taking on your product. That's a fantastic way to gauge what people are doing. It's also a great way to adopt your product in a way that you can say, well, next time they log in, I'm going to ask them something. You pop up a screen and say, hey, why are you not coming back more? Tell me. And it's a stupid example, I think, but I think you get the idea. You do something like that that keeps engagement higher. Or you engage them by sending them an email. You can do email newsletters, things like that. That's sort of on the cloud. There's a lot of very innovative and creative things you can do. On enterprise business, it's a little harder, right? Because I sell a box or I sell some software and then I go. Well, you want to go back every now and then and you talk to them. You go back to the company and say, hey, how's it going? What are you doing with the product? It's a very active way, and that's usually the salespeople doing that. But you can also, on the backside, obviously you can measure how many support calls you get and all those kinds of things. So make sure you actually have those channels open for the customer and kind of see what the interactions are there. But keep engaging in whatever levels. You can have user conferences, you can have meetups. If you look at companies, right, they do all these kinds of things. So keep your users engaged.
I mean, the thing about that is the same. I'm going to have this conversation after lunch, but what you've just put your touch on is regardless whether it's IT, coffee, consumer goods, it's all about follow-up and maintaining customer relations. As you said in your presentation, it's about relationships. So I think it's a golden rule about business and in any product. Isn't that right, Mohammed?
This is a very good point, and this is to follow up on your question about creation of jobs. You know, in the other part of the world, with technology, people are used today to download the software, install it themselves. Here, the good news here for you, Ahmed, is here you cannot do that. You know, here you need people to do the download for you, other people to do the install for you, and the other people need to watch it that it's working. You know, so this create jobs at the end of the day, which is not bad. You know.
Thank you very much. I know everybody's desperate to go for lunch. Thank you very much, and nice applause for our speakers. And then,
Thank you very much.
I think you're still going to be around to be talked to, and we'll see you at the gaming workshop afterwards. Thank you.